everybody, this is the Vikstrand. I don't know exactly when the news that they were going to make a movie about the Megalodon, came out. But I think it was so far back as 2008. And it was called the Megalodon back then. And it was stuck in development hell, and it was, swapped between different movie studios and different writers and different directors and different what have you. And then all of a sudden, it came with Jason Statham in the, starring role. And I never saw this in the cinemas because I thought it looked not very interesting. And I, had my problems with, shark movies in the past, just because this was a very big one with a very, very, high price tag attached to it. I wasn't swerved. And then I saw it and I thought that it was a totally fine movie. Then I rewatched it yesterday for the purpose of this review, and I still think that this movie is a totally fine and okay movie. It has a couple of really, really big hurdles that it quite cannot, leap over. Because when you're having a movie with a concept as silly as, the idea of the Meg and, them hunting thought to be extinct gigantic shark that is the size of buses. You need to have a certain movie made. You need to hide your weaknesses and enhance your strength. They kind of did the opposite. And while I think that this movie is not necessarily a bad movie, I actually sort of recommend it. I do have some very, very major complaints about it, and I will try to inform you about it. This is the Meg, or as I have to say it, shut up, Meg! Jason Statham plays a man who rescues people, from the bottom of the seas and stuff like that. His latest attempt at rescuing people from a nuclear submarine goes, however, a little bit awry, and some people dies. And this, hey. But Jason Statham, by the way, believes that there was something else down there with them in the submarine. He cannot have seen this, and frankly, there was very little he could have done, to have another outcome than what they did. But this is a very contrived way for him to, be relegated to drinking beers in Thailand and being bitter about it and waiting for the plot to basically arrive. And the plot does arrive eventually, because his ex-wife is stuck down in the Marinara Trench because she's working for this eccentric billionaire played by Rainn Wilson, who owns a research station of some description, and they have just found a place beneath the Marinara Trench where there is a totally different ecosystem and stuff like that, and they're exploring that thing. Isn't exploring fun? But they get stuck down there, and now Jason Statham has to, find them and, get them out of there. Unfortunately for them, but fortunately for us, the Megalodon follows them up, and now the, prehistoric shark that is the size of a bus has now set his sight on, killing everything in its way, and so now they're gonna have to stop it. This is basically our movie. This movie, in concept, is really fun. The thing is that when you're having a concept as silly as this, it is impossible to get tension to this one. You cannot build any Jaws tension to this one. You cannot build any horror surrounding this thing. But they try. This is one of the first problems this movie has. The conflicting tone of this movie. This is a movie that should have been drenched in gore, body parts, blood, and silly violence. But we're getting PG-13 violence. Out of all movies that has come out, the past 6-7 years, that should have been an R, but it's a PG-13. This is probably the best example of where it has hurt the most. Because this is a movie that, if it would have been, all out silly, all out, explosively big action sequences and, enormously amounts of silly carnage, this movie could have been really, really, really entertaining. But now they're playing it safe with the PG-13 rating, so we don't get that. The other problem this movie settled with is the fact that they are taking this way, way too serious. They should have had a movie that would have been, not, a comedy, but it should have been taken not as serious as this, because you can't take this serious because it is a monster. It is a thing that doesn't exist. It did exist at one point, but it doesn't exist now. And you cannot build tension around this one, and you cannot make this serious. But they tried to do it. Props to them for trying, but this is a movie that shouldn't have tried that. The sequences surrounding the Megalodon are really impressive. They look really big, and because this is $130 million worth of special effects that we're having, it still looks great. But if you could have added some really, really outlandish sequences and some really spectacular nonsense to this one, you could have made an absolute modern classic. They decided not to do that. And because of the PG-13 rating, this will affect the ending of this movie quite severely, because the ending should have been an absolutely enormous amount of carnage and fun and stuff. It is a very lackluster, rather flat and lame ending. Not necessarily a bad finish, but it was just okay. Considering that the middle part of this movie, where they're trying to hunt this thing with the boat that they're having, I think those sequences actually worked. There was some scope, there was some scale, there was some gravitas to those sequences. It actually worked. And also, this movie kind of starts a little bit wonky, because we have to wait 32 minutes before, the Meg actually shows up to wreck some shit. This is basically a tale of two movies. We have the super serious hunting shark movie, and we also have the sort of silly, almost Deep Blue Sea-esque movie that kind of doesn't mesh that well together. And we're having this story about the scientist and Bing Lay's very serious scientist who is maybe or maybe not having a romantic interest in Jason Statham, who, by the way, is in enormously great shape. Jesus Christ, that guy is in shape. They have non-existing chemistry, and the bantering between them is not very fun. And we also have a fucking kid in this one. This is also one of these occasions where, did you need a fucking kid in this movie also, just to make sure that we strip away anything cool about it? And yet, The Meg is not an offensively bad movie. It's just a little bit too slick, it's a little bit too well produced, and it is a little too expensive for its own good. This is a movie that should have been made for slightly less money with a, more hard-hitting rating. As I, mentioned before, it should have been a great hard R, and it could have been absolutely amazing. In the end, this is an entertaining movie that doesn't overstay its welcome. It has some spectacular sequences, and it has some okay comedy, but apart from Rainn Wilson's eccentric and pretty hilarious billionaire, which he seems to be enjoying himself a whole lot playing, the rest of the characters are sort of just there. They are, stereotypes and cliches that, seems just to walk around and breathe. I didn't remember any of them. I didn't care particularly much about anybody else except Statham and Wilson. In the end, I will say that this is a movie that is totally fine, but it could have been so much better. This movie has a ton of troubles, but it is still an enjoyable, silly movie. If yet it could have been more consistent with its tone, I probably would have given this one a much higher rating than the 47 that it gets. It also would have helped if we could have had an R rating. With an R rating, this movie could have gone to the moon. But now it is just stuck in a totally okay movie, which has a lot of enjoyable stuff and looks impressive, but this is still a movie that has hurdles that it cannot quite clear, and I was a little annoyed by it. So see you next time from, well, so-and-so reviewing, well, such and such. Thank you for watching. Thank you very much.